What's going on? Welcome to another PedalerzMN video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about my 2021 Poseidon X. Alright, so I've had the bike for a few months, and weather in Minnesota has finally allowed me to take this bike out for a few rides. I've put about 214 miles on the bike so far, and I'm ready to put my upgrades on, but before I start doing that, I figured I'd give you guys some initial thoughts on the stock build. Alright, so the Poseidon X hits the nail right on the head in terms of what I was looking for with this gravel bike purchase. I wanted a bike that essentially had road bike geometry with clearance for bigger tires and low gearing for climbing up dirt hills. Now this bike does that and more. On the road it feels snappy, it feels a lot like my track bike, which is my favorite bike to ride on the road, but then when you take this bike off-road, even on the steepest descents that I've tried so far, the bike has remained extremely composed and inspired a lot of confidence out of me. The bike literally feels fast. It just takes you and makes you want to try super hard, which is exactly what I wanted out of this bike. Some people might be looking for a gravel bike that has more mountain bike characteristics, and I could understand why you'd want that. I plan on having two gravel bikes, one that's more rooted in road and one that's more rooted in mountain bike territory. So I decided to go with Poseidon X because I felt like it was truly sticking to that idea more so than trying to balance the two. All right, so my experience with this bike over the last few months has been extremely positive. I am genuinely in love with the bike. I love the way it rides. I am super satisfied with my purchase. Now there were a couple small hiccups that I ran into along the way, and I'm going to touch on that at the end of the video. But for now, I'm going to show you guys a montage of me riding this bike, and then I'm going to get into a little bit of a game I like to call Fact and Opinion, where I tell you guys factual information about the bike, followed by an opinion on that subject. Alright, so we're going to be playing a little game I like to call Fact and Opinion, where I tell you a fact about the Poseidon X and then I give you my opinion on it. So we're going to start with the frame. Fact number one. The 2021 Poseidon X is made of 6061 butted hydroformed aluminum. An opinion about the frame is that it is one of the most responsive and stiff frames I've ever owned as far as aluminum bikes go. Alright, this might seem like an odd comparison, but if you've ever ridden a carbon fiber bike, I feel like the power transfer and the responsiveness of this frame is very similar to carbon. So much so that if we were on a super smooth pavement road in a blind test, I honestly think that I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between this and a carbon frame. However, things get more complicated when you add bumps into the mix. It becomes pretty obvious that this is an aluminum frame. Now, this isn't the harshest aluminum frame I've ever owned, but it certainly is not the most comfortable one I've ever owned. But for the purpose of going fast, who cares, right? Fact number two about the frame is that the rear wheel spacing is 135mm quick release. A second fact on top of that is that Poseidon sells a conversion kit that replaces the rear derailleur hanger on this side and replaces something or adds something to the other side, essentially, that allows you to run 142 millimeter through axle. My opinion on that is that that's pretty cool. You have a bike that right now supports a fairly cheap and under-desired set of wheels in the current market, and with a simple $20 upgrade, you're able to bring the bike into modern day wheel standards. All right, so our last fact about the frame is that it has 6 points to mount a water bottle cage. I don't know if I really have an opinion on that other than that's pretty cool. Maybe I can take this bike bikepacking. Fact, the Poseidon X comes with a full carbon fork, meaning the fork and the steer tube are carbon fiber. Opinion, I mean, it's pretty cool. Like, it's nice having a lighter front end, and carbon is a little bit more compliant than aluminum, so that kind of pays off on the hands. Fact number 2 about the fork is that it is a tapered 1 1/2 inch to 1 1/8 inch steer tube. This means that you can fit any modern fancy carbon fiber fork on the market today into this frame set. In my opinion, that's pretty cool. If this fork ever breaks, I'm going to have a crap load of options to replace it with. I hope that never happens, but if I ever get enough money to want to stick a $500 fork on a bike that I paid less than $1,000 for, I will definitely look into that. Fact, the Poseidon X comes with no-name hubs laced to no-name rims. In my opinion, these are cheap wheels. I didn't expect much out of them. If I'm going to say anything good about them, it's the fact that they roll a lot faster than I expected, and the free hub sounds kind of cool. Fact, the Poseidon X comes with 700C by 35mm Kenda small block 8s wrapped around those no-name rims. All right, so these tires actually performed a lot better than I expected them to. I've yet to wash out on any gravel or single track surface that I've taken this bike on. Now, that doesn't mean that I've been pushing the limits extremely, but what it means is I've been running harder tire pressure than I planned on when riding on dirt, and they still haven't failed me yet. The center knobs aren't that great for traction when you're going up a hill, but the side knobs definitely do their job. In terms of on the road, these tires are a lot quicker than I expected them to be. They definitely make a lot of road noise, but it doesn't seem to be sucking up your power as bad as other road tires that I've ridden have, so that's pretty good for them. Fact, the Poseidon X is rocking a 10-speed, 11 to 48 tooth Advent X group set in the rear. I've had plenty of 1x setups, but I've never had something with this wide of range. It seriously kicks ass. Also, for the price point, this group set is pretty similarly priced to what I put the 9-speed, like 11 to 34 group set on my Marin, and this performs just as good, if not better. Fact, the Poseidon comes with a 38-tooth Pro Wheel crankset up front. Now, this is definitely something that's dependent upon where you live. Minnesota isn't the hilliest place in the world. I think 38-tooth is a little bit small for my liking. I plan on swapping over to a 42-tooth with this bike just because I'm putting a lot of road miles on it, but even when I'm on the gravel, it's mostly flat. The gravel in Minnesota is pretty forgiving most of the time, so I think I'll be fine having a bigger chainring up front. I don't think I'm going to lose too much of my low end on the climbing, but I definitely think it will add some of my top end. Ultimately, the goal for me is to get my normal riding gear to be more in the center of the cassette, because right now I'm kind of riding on the top end of the cassette. Fact, the Poseidon X is running Tektro mechanical disc brakes with 160mm rotors. In my opinion, I would say the brakes are just fine. They're definitely not good. I've ran Tektro brakes on many disc brake setups that I've had in the past. I don't really have a strong beef with Tektro brakes. My problem with this bike is the fact that there isn't a barrel adjuster on the caliper. There's an inline barrel adjuster, but it doesn't seem to make much of a difference in the tension and brake feel. I was able to get the bike to stop me, but something that I'm gonna do pretty quick here is add barrel adjusters to the calipers. It is a fact that the Poseidon X comes spec'd with a 27.2mm seat tube, and it also comes with a House Poseidon seat. Now, I included both those things because I don't really have a big opinion on the seat tube. 27.2 is common enough that you should have plenty of options. It's definitely not going to be the best option if you want to run a dropper post, but they do make 27.2 dropper posts, and I think this bike is less suited for a dropper post than, say, the Poseidon Redwood. Now, I did mention the seat. Obviously, whether you like a seat or not is completely dependent upon your own body, so me having an opinion on this seat that's negative should not make you have any hesitations about buying this bike, and it shouldn't mean that you should discredit the seat from working with you. But this seat does not work with me. I've yet to take the bike on anything above 45 miles. My legs are definitely there, and I wouldn't mind doing that. But right around mile 40, every time I ride this bike, I am in agonizing pain because the seat does not work with me. It's too narrow, it lacks a cutout in the center, it's just not right. So that's something that I'm really excited to get off this bike because it's definitely the one thing on this bike that's actually holding me back from doing anything I want to do. Moving on to these pedals, the bike comes with these no-name, probably Poseidon pedals. Now, these are the nicest stock pedals I've ever seen on a bike. Even the Diamondback full suspension that I have has nice alloy pedals, but they don't grip nearly as well as these ones. I don't like these pedals by any means, but if I had to keep them, I wouldn't be like mad about it. It's just not ideal. And that's pretty amazing to me because even the nicest bike manufacturers usually spec their bikes with horrible pedals or don't include any to begin with. It is a fact that there is no indication whatsoever on Poseidon's website or on the actual stem what these dimensions are. Now I could measure them, but if I'm going to make a rough guess, I would say it's 100, maybe 80, but I think it's like 100 or 120 millimeter long stem with a pretty serious upsweep. I've been considering flipping it. I'm pretty flexible and I don't mind having the handlebars further away from me. I'm actually considering running a slightly longer stem. I'm a little nervous about doing that because I really like the way the bike performs on the gravel, and I'm worried that putting a longer stem on is going to put more weight over the front wheel. Overall, I'm not uncomfortable with this setup. I don't hate it. I wish I knew what it was so that I had an idea of where to go from here, but either way, it's a stem, it works, and for me, it doesn't ruin the fitment of the bike, and I guess that's what's most important for me. That might not mean the same thing for you, and I honestly don't know if they spec the same length stem on all the sizes. Was that opinion and fact at the same time? I don't know. The bars are Poseidon's house flared drop bars. My opinion on them is that they're actually a lot better than I expected them to be. Some people commented on them being pretty awful, but I honestly think they're super comfortable. All right, so I think I covered just about everything on this bike. I'm going to tell you guys about a couple hiccups that I ran into along the way, but overall, those are pretty much my overall thoughts on the stock setup with the Poseidon. All right, so I did say there were a couple hiccups that I ran into with the bike, and I want to touch on those things real quickly. My Poseidon X started making this noise when turning the handlebars about 60 miles into me riding it. Now, I've never owned a full carbon fork, and I did not realize that carbon is a material that tends to amplify noises that other materials would honestly not even react to. Something like sand being stuck in the headset can sound like that. So upon inspecting what was causing this noise, I decided to drop the fork out. I was kind of nervous that maybe something had broke with the fork, but what it actually turns out the cause was they did not put any lubricant on any of the bearings in the headset. I cleaned up the whole headset assembly, removed a small amount of corrosion that was starting to build up on the crown race, and then I put everything together with grease, and now it works perfectly. I've ridden it through water, and it still has yet to make a noise. So it was just something that they forgot to do. It was my bad for not checking it. Usually when I order a new bike, that's something that I do. However, I felt like, from what I could tell with the wrap job that Poseidon had done in shipment, and just the general workingness of the bike when I got it, I kind of was under the impression that Poseidon checked all the boxes and that I didn't need to do something like that. All right, another major hiccup that kind of annoys me is on the front of the head tube on the bike, right where the Poseidon logo is. This bike, now for like the last 4 or 5 years, I believe, has had a historical repeated incident of this happening, and that's that the front brake cable rubs on the head tube and instantly wears away the paint. Now I get that paint is somewhere where Poseidon has cut the cost to get you a nice bike at a really affordable price, and I completely understand that, and I'm okay with that. The problem is this has been a reoccurring issue, and I don't know much about paint, so maybe I'm just making up stuff, but like, I feel like they could at least try to like do a thicker coating around the head tube or something to try to deter that from happening. The last hiccup that I ran into with this bike, and the problem that I've ran into, is the standover head on this bike is taller than any 56 I've ever ridden. Now, I do clear the frame just barely. It's not a game-ending issue, and once I'm on the bike, I hardly need to put my feet down. So it's not really something that I actually am bothered by, but it is kind of surprising, and it has been a pretty strong deciding factor in what size tires I'm going to run on this bike, and more particularly what size rims I'm going to run on this bike. So there you have my thoughts on my 2021 Poseidon X. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, you should subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video where I'm probably going to be throwing some new wheels and tires on this bad boy.